think we're good. Think so. Think audio is working. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Roach Crossing Weekly General Live Stream, February 24th, 2022. I am just now realizing after all these months that I always forget the exact wording that I use for the live stream titles. Hello, Tristan. And just now realizing that I can, despite the fact that I have memorized it at this point, just going to turn off my alarm here. Despite the fact that apparently I have memorized the wording, that as soon as I press the go live button, I get a notification in my inbox here. Tristan, since you're not going to be here for very long, I decided to do something special for this live stream. So if you're interested in if you're going to be placing an order soon, shoot me an email and just remind me that you were in the live stream as just a little something for what I'm going to offer in a bit. So anyways, what I was saying is I can just hit the live stream button and I will always have the wording because it pops up in my my inbox the second that we go live. So boy, what a week. We're in the time of year grind set and the mixture of fortuitous and not so fortuitous circumstances. Hello, vocabulous. Mixture of fortuitous and not so fortuitous circumstances over the last week to have made for some interesting things, to have some interesting good and some interesting not so good things to have happened. Maybe I'll touch on a little bit of the not so good later. But yeah, just have been busy again. Fortunately, with the amount of busyness and the slowing down of some stuff, I've been able to get on top of all the husbandry stuff, and I'm going to be getting ready to take not quite a vacation, of some personal things to tend to in a couple of days, like the 4th through the 9th. So I'm sort of getting ready for that, getting ready for spring, because wow, March is just right around the corner. It is just steamrolling its way here, which means that I will be on my way to Alabama to collect in the end of March, and then subsequently dead end of May, early June, will be off to Florida to also collect. And of course, there's everything that will occur in between now and then, such as the blob of yard work that I do every spring, putting up new fencing for Victor, who, you know, he's been pretty self-sufficient today. You know, I think it was last live stream that he was having some boy things happen, and he's been very quiet today. By always getting the proper fencing up in the yard, getting ready for all the summer projects. Not too many bug projects that I have that are directly dependent on the summertime, but it's just a great time to go out collecting for stuff. As springtails, as soon as the ground finishes thawing, and some orthopterans. I do want to try and collect some Springfield crickets. Gryllus velitus, I think, is the current description, unless they just, in that revision, they call it something else now. So things like that. I'll probably find a couple of the velitus when I'm cleaning the front yard, with an I, not an S, like I was thinking. I'll probably find a couple, tidying up the leaves and whatnot in the front yard. Yeah. So just quite a few things. I put up another video on the channel of Hemithorsassera vittata. I was anticipating the quality to be a bit better, but even though I was being very careful with the angles when I was spraying in it, still got some condensation on it, some water on the glass. So the video is not as clear as it could be at times, but still demonstrates their activity. It really shows them off as the lively little fellas that they are. So hopefully more people will see them and desire to keep them, even though they are a little bit more setup intensive, which is, I say for roaches because, if you get a reptile, people are telling you, oh, get a get a temperature, humidity gauge, basking bulb, UVA, UVB bulb, these things, cleanup crew, this sort of mulch, this sort of bedding, this sort of bioactive material, etc. And then I'm saying that this roach that just needs a tank with a heat lamp and some coconut fiber is setup intensive. So yeah, trying to think what else. Just overall, it's nice. Well, I can get to some of the good things. So on Sunday, I went with Kai to the Cleveland Reptile Show, Cleveland Reptile Expo. And it was great. For me, Kai was not as impressed as he is with our local show because apparently they didn't have a good tarantula selection. Ever since John Apple moved to Wisconsin, I have not been very impressed with the tarantulas at our local show, but I'll trust Kai's word in this situation there. But it seems something probably has happened in the last couple of years between a lot of the vendors I saw at the Cleveland Expo and the local expo, because there were a lot of familiar faces that used to vend at the local expo that now apparently don't for whatever reasons. I'm assuming some sort of falling out or just some sort of drama, because a lot of the reptile vendors have not popped up, and it's been a little saddening. It made me think that the hobby, or reptiles at least, was going a different way. And then now to see that, no, it's fine. It's just all these vendors decided to go somewhere else for some reason. Is a little discouraging, but makes me want to go back to the Cleveland show when I have more space and plans for setting up different reptiles. Hello. I did end up, I bought some miscellaneous isopods. There's always a bunch of isopod vendors at shows. Whether or not they impress moi is a different story, but there were some species that I had not heard of armadillidium and whatnot that I was able to pick up. So it's good. Armadillidium CF scabarimum, pretty nifty. Seems like one that's kind of a niche interest for people. Like a lot of the other armadillidiums are. People probably brought them in thinking, oh, people will just buy any old random armadillidium because everybody wants to collect all of them, and now people are getting a little bit more discretionary with what they buy, because people, I guess, end up with a billion Parachi, and there's only so many people wanting to buy straight up wild type Parachi and stuff like that. So not too many Cubaris, or Marulinellas. I would have loved to see some of those. Hi, Joshua. Good to see you. I'm going to answer Vocabulus's question at the off topic. Do you have experience with, or are you familiar with South Everglades and Henry County collected Chicobulus spinigerus? Yes, kind of. I think there's a line of Chicobulus from Southern Everglades. Henry County. Hey, what's up? If you're gonna start acting fresh, you gotta wait outside. No. That's my arm. It's so cute though. Let me look up where Henry County is. Hendry County. No, I don't think we have any from that area. Let's see where Lee County is in relation to that. So I have some from Lee County that I received about a month and a half ago and set up, but not from Hendry County. Oh, Allen is the conservation Chicabolist from there. If so, then yes, I do have experience with them. They seem to be, I mean, all the Chicabolists seem to be the same husbandry overall, at least in my experience. I had some trouble with the salmons, but I'm wondering if that was the condition they arrived in and not necessarily the husbandry, because at this point I'm at 5 different localities and haven't had any issues with any of them. So I'll probably grab some more that whatever the county the salmons are from eventually when they pop up again, and then try some others as tracked lines pop up in the market. I've been wanting to keep some from Georgia for some time, so I hope that answers your question. But getting back to the expo thing, met up with the infamous Orrin McMonagle and got a bunch of stuff from him. Definitely does not. Everybody seems to think that Orrin is much older than he actually is, but he also looks a lot younger than he actually is, which creates some sort of weird time distortion around him. But I was able to get some stuff that I wanted to start or restart. I'll finish with your question vocabulus there. Do you find any there better than any others in terms of expression and demeanor? The Big Pine Keys are just nice all around. You know, they look so different from a lot of them since they don't have any white or cream on them. I do like the conservations for the AK Mikosuki for the sort of rufous color that they have. It's very unique among Chicabolists to have that sort of rusty color over the patterning versus some lines like the salmons and other ones will have more of those extra colors will be it appears to be more in line with the banding and not as if you've kind of taken a editing paintbrush and smeared over it with color. And I do like the archbolts for the color. I think I haven't seen in a while are the back in the day there was just the just ivories. Nobody kept track of localities, but wherever that set was coming from originally, or wherever those were coming from originally, just had a very nice deep blue black markings with the sort of actual ivory creamy coloration on the sides between the segments. And I really miss that aesthetic, and I'm hoping a locality like that pops up available eventually. I think some of the ones that I had found circa 2013, a little manatee were very similar to that. It seems like that's in Lee County, I think. Let me double check. So it's just south of Tampa. Okay, so Lee County is quite a bit of ways from the those ones I was finding. So I guess eventually, if I could collect those again, that'd be neat, or see them to compare if my memories being hazy or not. So, but yeah, I got some neat stuff from Oren, some Glomerus pustulata to add to the current set that I have. Some of the Narcissus americanus albinos. That's an older strain that a lot of people seem to work with, do well with, and then fail with. So hopefully in it for the long run again this time. What else? He did end up having what seemed to be pure Porcellio expansus orange, which are not something you can find easily nowadays. Some idiot contaminated theirs or mixed colonies of expanses probably to increase production, or because they started losing some and they wanted to bump their numbers, they just didn't care. And so a couple of sets of expansus orange that I bought or swapped for in the last year ish have all been crosses with white, which is just awful if they're not tracked, because you're spending a lot of money or trade value on something you're expecting to be really cool and consistent, and then you end up getting something completely different than what you wanted. It's just careless. So, and I think that's probably one of the most egregious offenders there are the crossed expansus lines, because the pure expansus orange are very large, very pretty, and I believe that they're separated from the whites in the wild by a mountain ridge, and I can double check that in a second here. So there's a bunch of odds and ends. I did end up buying some corn snakes as well. There were some locality corn snakes from Dade County Road number, whatever the road numbers are on my containers. So I ended up getting those too. Yeah, let's see, double check on this. It also seems like maybe there could be other populations of unique expanses between these two ones. So they're not. There are some mountain ranges isolating the oranges. It seems like there's actually a separate pocket of oranges actually here too. Seems like there's arid regions. There's sort of a mountainous area, chain of mountains that's broken up by some lowlands and whatnot. So I could see how these populations have become isolated and have whatever founding effect, and the selective pressures on each one are different. But it's a real shame to get them mixed up because they're very distinct. So, so yeah, I got that stuff from Warren, picked up a couple new colonies of things, did a blitz and put everything away. It was very nice being on top of having everything put away and taken care of. And just gotta hope that keep that momentum going. I have plenty of time to do maintenance in the next couple of weeks because I'm still waiting on some heat packs to pop up, and weather in a lot of places for a lot of tropical stuff is not the best for shipping without heat packs. So I'm at the mercy of those starting to arrive. And of course, again, as I noted, I'll be taking some time off in the 8th, the 4th through 9th ish, so won't be shipping them as well. Alan, my Alabama visit is, I think we had discussed I would arrive late the 24th of March and then leave as early as possible, I guess, on Sunday the 27th, giving me March 25th, Friday, March 25th, and Saturday, March 26th to give the talk and go out and commit some bug shenanigans. So, trying to think if there is anything else I was going to mention, bring up. Or was it the week before? It might actually be the week before. Maybe it was this, arrive the 17th, 18th, 19th, do stuff, and then leave the 20th, I think. Whichever one wasn't your Puerto Rico trip. Yeah, so it would have been the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th is when I would be planning for whatever I had mentioned before. So, yeah, geez, that's coming up fast too. Just looking at the calendar, because next weekend's that, and then the next weekend's the next expo, and oh boy, there's a lot of stuff to do. At least I should have a relatively peaceful April with respect to traveling and things like that. It's nice that shipping gets easier during the summertime. I know people complain about it being too hot to ship things, but I can count the number of DOAs, or whole orders, even just one little part of an order that I've had pop up on one hand during spring, summer, fall. It's just I've never had a problem with my style of shipping during warm weather. It's always the winter that stuff has problems. Just planning on just a little bit of everything in Alabama. I had mostly intended on getting finally getting some strong colonies of a couple of problematic Parcoblata species going, like Divisa lata. And that's because I wanted to go and catch subadults or adults that were just maturing, etc., so I can just get a guaranteed gigantic baby boom and have massive titanic colonies of those, hopefully at the end of the summer going into the winter, because that's when I usually lose Parcoblata, because I don't tend to diapause them, or I try to avoid doing that with any of the colonies of them, because it's just a bit of an inconvenience. So then it'll just be whatever else we happen to stumble across. So that'll be a very very casual 2-day ish collecting expedition. Uh, what else? It's one of those weeks that just really flew by, and I'm trying to think of anything specific in particular that sort of popped up or doing well. Any new babies? Sinertoides, Quadrispinosa, Vicabulus. Thank you. I really hope if I end up with 30-ish subadults of both species, I'll be pretty happy. But I really hope that this will be a last time. Just put all the effort into collecting this time and not have to worry about ever having to do this again. I'm trying to figure out the exact Latin for this thing. Sinertoides quadrispinosa is a cosmetid harvestman that I started finding babies in the colony of yesterday or the day before, when I was doing a more intense maintenance that I usually do. And so, it's bigger than the Vanonis, and I think they'll be very popular. They still fluoresce under black light, and of course they're tropical, versus the Vanonis range from temperate to semi-tropical. So I will say, my Vanoni Sei, I will say, Vanoni Sei are doing very well, as they always have. These Sinertoides are doing very well too. But strangely, my Vanonis ornatus, under the same conditions, aren't doing as well as they could be doing. I think I have been selling them, but I sold like a group of 8 or something like that. I don't know if that was actually part of the original group that I was sent or given in the around December. I think maybe, unless no, I don't think so. They were definitely larger than when I received them. But the Sinertoides, I have definite immatures of. So I just figured that if I cut down the number in the colony of Duronatus, that more babies would just sort of fill the void. So if there were any in the substrate, so we'll find out in about a month, or if I go in there and I see the little immatures, because they're very morphologically different. They're very shiny. Some eggs. Can we see some bugs? Yeah. Let me see what I got laying around here. I'll get Victor out of here. Come on, Victor. Come on. Come on, you can't eat the bugs. Come on. I'm in this big blockhead. Or see some eggs. So here's a nice Texas unicorn manted adult female. Let's see, is that in good focus there? Maybe it's an okay focus. Very patient. So, of course, it's a manted, so it should really look like this most of the time. So I really like this species. I will hopefully get a nice little breeding group going of these. It's been a while. This is actually my first time working with them since about 2009. Think so, about 2009. They're much easier than I remember, but I do have warmer ambient temperatures than I did then. They were in the bedroom that I still slept in at the time when I was keeping them, and with the AC blasting during the winter time, or during the summertime, so I don't think they were quite as comfortable as they are in the 80 plus degree office now. So I really like them because even though they're very mantis-y, they're also their legs are very spidery, not very usual looking mantid legs. They just look more supple, I guess, than mantid legs usually look. So, and I think this female matured 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So, maybe an area to take. I could show off. I know another thing to bring up that I brought up last time. So this is an adult female. Yeah. So this is an adult female. The orchid mantids, I actually sold all of them. They sold pretty quickly, and I am down to basically the stock that I'm holding back for breeding. It'll be my first time producing orchid mantids if I'm able to get some pairings. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, the Arizona ones, everybody complains about not being able to find and not being able to keep and stuff, but like just keep Texas if you know. I can understand like getting them the Arizona ones when they pop up, like this is very easy mantid to keep and to accommodate. And I do also love the brown contrast with the green. So so yeah. And you can see the unicorn bit is kind of exaggerated. It's actually two focus. It's actually two horn points. It's just kind of like semi-fused at the base, but there's two individual tips at the top of the supposed horn. But I mean, if you look at it from the side, then it's definitely a unicorn E. So yeah, I really like these. Definitely makes a good mantid. A lot of the U.S. native ones that aren't ground dwelling are pretty good pets, like Stagmomantis as well. Bruneria, although they can be kind of tricky since they seem best adapted to walking on grasses or lots of small twigs sort of fashioned together-ish instead of individual sticks. So, but they're still pretty adaptable. So yeah, we'll hope that pairings go well for these guys. Figure out something else to show off from in here too eventually. Put that on nice and gentle. Don't want any legs getting squished. I did do a more intensive check on all the Aranave guy. Was going to crack them open, I had mentioned before, and dump them out and look into them that way. But decided I just wanted to do probably something in the yard. Just wanted to do sort of a lighter investigation into them. So I just sort of took out the little paper towel wads here that I used for a little extra layer of humidity retention. And this side's very, very moist because that's the watering side and off the heat pack. This side is with the fish flakes is what goes on the actual heat pad. And they're doing really well all around. There's babies in some that there weren't babies in before. And the only one, again, that seems to be having any issues getting going is the Sahuaritas, which is very surprising to me, considering that I had collected so many of them originally, and now we're sort of down to, I don't know, maybe 12, and then there's a good number of booths. So I'm gonna go see what he's barking at. Coming out of the bugs put away. What? So, yeah. Is there something in the yard? Yeah. His little hackles are up, so you probably saw her. Same thing. What? 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 This thing out front. The deer have been roaming in big packs. Also, we've encountered them out in the front yard a handful of times. What? You're trying to tell me something? Is there a boy trapped in the well? What? Do you want to go outside? You want to show off how cute you are? Do you want to go outside? Go outside? Okay, let's go outside. All right, we're gonna go outside. We'll be right back. Turn this back into the chair live stream again. Come on, let's go outside. Come on, you big gopher. All right. Maybe that'll be a thing. I'll have to get some chair live stream t-shirts. Chair stream. He is very cute. He is and has been for the last month going through dog puberty, and he's intact and will remain intact until his genetic testing comes back and says that he should not be used for studying in the future. But until then, he remains intact. Curious, what editing software do you use to create your roach pics with the white backgrounds? I use GIMP. It's a free image editing software. It gets semi-frequent updates. I don't want to dump the money on Photoshop or anything more than that, so I use GIMP since it's free, and it works. Sometimes it can be kind of glitchy and not the most user-friendly. They've been improving on it every couple of years. They'll change something that's just really painfully annoying for the better every couple of years. And again, I can't really argue with free because free is free. So that's what I use for that stuff. So, what was I saying? Oh, the Aaron Vega. So yeah, it's going well. I actually have enough in some of the, but way less user friendly than Photoshop. Yeah, the last one that I had on the old computer, because I never bothered to update it and have auto updates from on or whatever, was there's just would annoy the crap out of me. Like the little dockable toolboxes they'd like become disjointed, or they would like stack improperly and all this other weird stuff, and it would just drive me nuts. But I just sort of adapted to it and just sort of dealt with it and had my own little like workarounds. um and I can say that this new version of GIMP has been much better than the old ones. They've made some reasonable improvements on a fair number of things there. So yeah, I don't know why I really want to talk about the Aaron Vega right now, because I'm not the most excited about it. But what I was going to say was I think there's a couple that I might be able to put up on the site, but the problem is, do you use Linux? No, I have a PC running Windows. I don't have quite the IQ to use or look into anything more advanced, and this has always worked for me. And I hope that it'll just be that way in the future, unless there's Linux master race eventually. So, I mean, I'm on the computer for emails, for site work, for spamming stuff in Discord, and occasionally playing Minecraft and Overwatch. So I don't have a desire to look into anything beyond enabling myself to do those things. Anything else? Yeah. Oh! I can show these off. Affinity Photo is good. We'll try it soon. Some may remember from last week the drain flies. I'm gonna try and get this without the glare. Put this behind it, in front of it. Try and get the glare off. Is that from the screen? I can't see. Okay, though that seems to be better. Maybe. There we go. That's better. So these are from a glob of hair from my ex-roommate, or housemate, in the trashed bathroom downstairs. I had to redo all the drywall and stuff on this summer, etc. But Will and I yanked this glob of stuff out of the drain, hoping that it would be infested with clogmia and not Lepisiodina or Psychota, the two cultures I already have going. And it is. And what do you know? I had an adult pop up yesterday or the day before, and then more. It's just there's been a nice little stream of them popping up in here, and it's very exciting to have more than one adult clogmia pop up at the same time. It's like if you have 3 of them, you're pretty much guaranteed to have a colony started. So I do love these guys. They're really cool. Culturing them is really easy. I think they're going to be, honestly, Lepisiodina have been extremely popular. I don't even remember how many colonies of those I've already sold. There's a couple of colonies that are on the prop shelf right now getting established to ship out. But I really like them. I think they'll have some application. Somebody was looking into getting them for Braden. Sometimes he's in the chat. Getting them for basically a drip feeder for his dwarf or pygmy chameleons. Basically, you'd set up a culture somewhere in the container and then just sort of let them trickle out of it over time, and it's an auto feeder for your tiny predators. So looking forward to seeing how that goes. Lepisiodina are actually much smaller than these clogmia, so there's more applications for the clogmia than for those. Maybe one day a mutation will pop up for short wings or something, and then it'll be an easy to breed a non-fruit fly feeder that eats anything you don't have to buy a specific medium for. Debating drinking this coffee. I got this like sugar-free, blah 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 free coffee that's just like pure concentrate, and it doesn't look very appetizing right now, and it doesn't taste coffee enough for my brain to want to drink it for the coffee taste, but it's got like whey protein or something. Yeah, okay, that was better than I thought it would be. Everything reminds me of my ex. No, it wasn't my ex. It was actually, well, I guess it was my one of my ex friends whose hair clogged up the drain. My ex did not have long enough hair to do that, so there's just debating drinking the filter fly media. Now I'll pass on that. Although apparently in industrial sewage treatment, they rely pretty heavily on the cycota to help with the purification process. I think they're called filter flies or drain cake flies or something. So they're very important as part of that biological purification of drinking water. So if you are drinking water, you are drinking the downstream product of filter flies, basically. So I have I have aspirations for big things in life, and one of those is to have the world's largest moth fly collection. I'm already there, but you see that I gotta cement that leadership. I have to have more species. I feel like when I get to 10 species, then I can start making bold claims about having the largest collection in the world without feeling rivaled. Right now, I'm sitting pretty at 3 species, but that could change. We had all this isopod crap pop up in the last 5 years, and you have all this millipede stuff popping up now. Who knows? Maybe in a couple of years there'll be drainflies.com, and everybody will want to have all the fancy drain flies, and they'll be paying hundreds of dollars for some that have been ripped straight out of Southeast Asia and on their deathbed, but people will buy them anyways because they feel like wasting their money. So Tristan, thank you for joining us. Again, if you're thinking about an order in the near future, shoot me an email and remind me of the stream, because I will be offering something in a little bit in the stream. I don't think this is going to be a long one. I do have some things that I would like to do. I'm going to work on doing my spring cleaning of the house. The bug room is relatively clean, surprisingly. I still need to mop the floors and do some dusting and whatnot, but upstairs definitely needs the winter filth needs to be cleaned. So the drain flies eat pretty much anything. They're feeding on the bacteria and other stuff that colonizes gross places like drains and whatnot. So they're living their hashtag best life in the drain in the decrepit bathroom downstairs, just eating whatever is growing on human hair and whatever else had last gotten clogged in the drain. And right now, to boost production, because we are all about getting that hardcore boosted drain fly production in this household, I have put a small piece of dog food in, which has become putrid in the shallow water. But the drain flies, the larvae will just enumerate and eat that like it is the best thing they have ever eaten, because it is the best thing that they have ever eaten, perhaps for the last probably 2-3 generations a year, 5 years ago. So probably the best they've eaten in about 10 generations. So I should get those clognia established. The Psychota are basically tiny clognia, but they hold their wings differently, and they're smaller than Lepisiodina. More one-to-one with fruit fly size. I'm not sure if they'll have a usage, because you could just use fruit flies instead of them. The other I had mentioned before, I was kind of concerned that maybe these weren't clognia and they were Lepisiodina that had escaped the container while I was packing up while I've been packing up an order, making a culture, and then colonized there. But all the different drain flies, although they have a lot of overlap in their food preferences, in that you can keep them all the same in captivity, there was probably some pretty intense um, competition between them in more natural settings. Like it's possible that the Lepisiodina could have gone to colonize the drain downstairs and were outcompeted by the Clogmia or eaten by the Clogmia, etc. I don't know why they're called Clogmia. It would make too much sense if it was because they feed in clogged up drains. Vicabulus, Vicabulus. I do sell fruit fly cultures. I have them listed on the site. I think you can get to them just by looking up fruit flies. They might pop up on the Diptera tab. All fruit fly species strains. Um, I had a lot more last year. I had started some projects like that A. Lamau one, which had a black body with white eyes. But I ran into some genetic problems. I think that uh, being homozygous recessive for two different wing modifying traits was actually lethal or detrimental to the fruit flies. And I'm sure that there's some hard numbers on this. I didn't look too much into it, but I just could not get that strain off the ground. And I'm thinking if I want to do it again, I'm going to have to get a separate line of flighted or just wingless black bodieds and not the ones with the weird messed up tiny wings, because those double homozygous recessives seem to um, not be vigorous or perhaps even lethal, being double homozygous recessive for both types of wing modifications. So, but anyways, I have the regular hide eye, the flightless hide eye, which will become flighted if kept too warm as a culture during development. I haven't had any problems with that. I have the Drosophila melanogaster wingless, which are actually my special blend of insanely inbred. Started with one female over and over and over and over again. And I talked about this on the Aquarimax stream, how I had inbred them just insanely for several generations, just for the heck of it. And ended up with a fruit fly that seems to be very adapted to the medium that I use, because I get excellent production, long production, etc., out of my colonies of melanogaster with these inbred wingless ones. And then finally, and I've made an extreme effort to hold on to these against all odds, I do have Drosophila bazzatii, buzzard eye, I guess buzzard eye. This is so weird to say with the getting used to the single eye, double eyes on the end of things. Drosophila bazzatii. It doesn't roll off the tongue as much as it's like buzzard eye or bazzati. But I have those as well, and I like them because they're intermediate in size. They reproduce at sort of a slower, more paced rate, and not as explosive as the Mel's and the hide eyes. And when you think the culture is burnt out, you'll usually get a second emergence of adults, just if you water or something like that. So it's I do like them quite a bit. They've come in handy multiple times with the sort of staggered emergence of adults. When I run out of hide eye or melanogaster, I have those available to use. So I really do like them. I would recommend them for people who want a culture of things just to keep around for emergency circumstances, which happen more often than you think with fruit flies. And yeah, Aquarimax and we're gonna. I can't even remember how many times I've been on his stream in the last year. And we always have more topics to talk about. And I know we had the last one last week, basically because the prior live stream we had kind of got derailed, from being more about roaches to being more about isopods, and then it got back on track with this current one. But everybody wants to talk about isopods and blah blah blah. So, speaking of talking about something other than isopods, I won't be overly presumptuous, but about people watching. But if anybody hasn't seen the video of the Hemithyrsospora vittata, I put up a video yesterday, yesterday, of my Vittata colony, and just to sort of get them out there and more in the popular eye with respect to roach species, because I feel they have a lot of potential to be very popular. One of the big complaints with roaches is the nocturnalness, which isn't really an issue if your room's not like brightly lit, for one, and for two, if the colony gets a good size, you'll just have roaches out constantly, anyways. But it's nice to have something that's more uh, obligately diurnal, I guess. And so the Vittata offer that, and they're very colorful too, because you could have a colony of Blatella vega or Asahinai, Asahinai, Asahinai. I have to really get rid of that. Trust me, you got to start a roach crossing Instagram. Maintaining social media is very time and whatnot intensive, and I've had this. Kai has been very insistent on managing that sort of stuff for me, and I say, yeah, I'll get ready for it, I'll do it eventually. But the problem is, and this is a hot take, this is a very hot take coming from me. I put my time and effort into, nowadays, doing emails and giving good, timely responses to emails, because that was something I had struggled with at times in the past. Now bringing that to the forefront of this is something people really want out of Roach Crossing, and so I will give them that out of Roach Crossing. So focusing on replying to people frequently and keeping dialogues going has been a priority of mine, in addition to, as I always have, prioritizing husbandry and providing quality stock. And the amount of work and time that goes into maintaining colonies at the numbers that I want and need, in addition to, oh, well, this colony is full of Porcellanites prunosis, so when I go to ship this out, it's going to have a couple prunosis in it. Or, there's some Trichorhina tomentosa. The devil's rice is getting into all my colonies, and now it's in all my stuff. But it doesn't matter because I have a pretty Instagram. So I prioritize actually taking care of my colonies, getting people quality insects that are tracked, quality invertebrates that are tracked, strain names known, all that stuff. Putting the effort into keeping cultures isolated, all that stuff takes the time away from doing those sort of more social media trendy type things. And of course, I'm trying to break that mold a little bit with the stuff on the YouTube, and of course sitting here with the live stream as well. But it's a lot to keep track of for me. And I could put a bunch of stuff on my phone, but I have to micromanage my life enough as it is. So basically, if it's going to happen, it'll happen eventually, and I'll sort of, I'll slide into that sort of groove. I'm going to take a couple pictures of something and get to just throw on an Instagram. So, I guess one post a day isn't that bad, but then I get to times like this where last week I haven't had the time to sit down and write blogs. So, I found myself sort of grasping at doing that and getting those up and going, because I was having a lot of, another thing was getting the blog posts on the website, which is great because the website brings me more site traffic and whatnot. So, yeah, taking care of everything, it takes a lot of time. And, it's actually surprising that most of my time is not necessarily spent on husbandry per se, because I have many roach colonies that are operating at full capacity and whatnot, and basically takes a couple seconds of spraying with water to hydrate them and throwing a handful of dog food in, once every 7 to 20 days. So that's not the issue. But what does take up a lot of time is I am constantly getting new things and have to set those up and put both the brain effort and the resource acquisition into doing that. For example, and when I do things nowadays, I try to do it to last for years. When I set up a container, or at least a year, ideally multiple years. So when I got a lot of that stuff from Oren, a lot of people might have thrown it into like a small shoebox or something like that, some of the millipedes and stuff. And then, eventually you find yourself having to upgrade it. You have to stop watering. You have to put more brain effort into micro decision making about the colony, which versus nowadays, I buy a gigantic tank. I fill it with the appropriate resources. I throw the organisms in, and then I sit on my hands for years and wait for things to come to fruition. But of course, I have to go buy the tanks. I have to, at least in the last couple of months, have Will make the lids and make the substrate, get the animals in the first place, track the strains. It's just a lot of stuff to do. But once a container is set up, then it's just a little bit of maintenance here and there, and of course all that adds up. But Will and I tore through over 250 isopod cultures in about 3 hours, and that was all the maintenance that I have to do on them for every 20-ish days when I go through and set things up the way they are. So I have a lot of workarounds to cut down on the time. And of course, when I go on collecting trips and whatnot, actually, that's another thing is I do all the work before I leave, and then I can be gone for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even if I wanted to, but even 4 weeks, and not really have to worry, depending on the time of year. Not have to worry, who's going to feed them, who's going to water them, at least for the invertebrates, for things like the dog and the poultry and the rabbits and the guinea pigs. I do need somebody to do something more consistently than that. But I can just leave the collection just like, okay, I'm good. And the problem is not the time that I'm gone. That's not the issue whatsoever. It's when I get back, I need to get back on track with things. I need to respond to emails. I need to go through and put away everything that I collected or research it to identify it. And of course, actually, after a long trip, I am physically tired too. I need a day to just like sit and veg and sort of get reacclimated on a routine. So the actual trips are not the problem. It's actually recovering for them and getting back on the schedule that has always been sort of the Achilles heel in these situations. So there's another thing, I don't know, Kim, if you're here or if Kim ever watches this, this is why I've occasionally been quite snide with Kim, my friend who, along with Samson, I have known for a very long time from the Roach forum and whatnot. But Kim frequently wants some new bugs of sorts, and is also very frequently like, I don't have time to like take care of those Porcellus gamer. Like it's cool, but I don't have time. And it's like I give her crap over this. Like, Kim, just set it up like this, and you can literally forget about it for 3 months, and it'll be fine. So I understand. People wanting to give optimal care to things, and you don't want to have to worry about things when you go away in any capacity and whatnot. But when I'm sitting over here and I'm like, I throw a handful of dog food in with the colony of something and think, oh yeah, like I could disappear for a month and these would be just fine when I came back without any other inputs. It has tinted my view of things, and the advice that I give to people is, just put the effort into the setups, and things will take care of themselves. And I had talked about before with I had talked about before with where was I going with this? Putting the effort into the setups. I started reading your comment there. Oh, look, here's the bot. I hope it's not a Russian bot, considering the current political climate. Hopefully, it's a Ukrainian bot, or perhaps a Yugoslav. Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore, does it? Or a Polish bot. How can you keep enclosures moist enough for that long? So at this time of year, if I went through and saran wrapped all the lids on my 10-gallon tank enclosures, which are currently 100% screened, they would be just fine for that duration of time without supplemental heat, etc. Because the air temperature or the air humidity in the house is so dry that even a seemingly completely sealed container will still constantly lose water. Will constantly evaporate into the surrounding air. There's just big of a difference of gradient in the humidity within the enclosures and outside of them. And I'm actually a big fan of this being the case because it means that I can't overwater. There was one of the isopod containers, the new style containers that I have a watering can for when I water things, like a big watering can as well as a big pump sprayer. And when I was setting up one of the isopod enclosures, I wanted the substrate is relatively dry when I put it in, then I have to hydrate it to create the humidity gradient, blah, blah. So I just poured a bunch of water from the watering can into it, and I ended up overwatering. So when I set it up and I actually looked at it while it was sitting on the shelf, there was the inch and a half ish of coconut fiber and other material on the bottom, and it was flooded all the way up to that. We just completely underwater for a terrestrial isopod. And I just sort of thought, whatever, because it'll evaporate. A week later, it was looking more manageable. It wasn't actually standing water in that enclosure. It's just 50% humidity or lower, just sucks the water out of every enclosure. During the summertime, it's the exact opposite. You get to about 65% humidity, then you could do what would be a very gentle spray during the wintertime or during lower humidity. Suddenly things become drenched and stuff will die in condensation and all that stuff. So really, it depends on the time of year which is why I like the trips during the summer, is because I don't need somebody to come and water things, which is something that I have had to do during the wintertime. And I think Victor wants to come. Apparently not. So, yeah, that's how I manage things, is with the humidity and the nice deep substrates and whatnot to buffer against too much or too little moisture. Because having a deep substrate can also a relatively deep. None of my substrates are over 6 inches deep, really. Some of the millipede containers, when I've been adding on layers and layers of leaves and wood, will sometimes push about 6 inches, but most of them is in the inch to 3-ish inches range. So, but having a deep substrate means if you overwater, the bugs can move up in the substrate column. If you underwater, things can move down in some cases. And that's also why it's nice to have a good diverse texture to the substrate and complexity, is because then you create a lot of little microclimates that things can find just where they want to be. And a really golden example of that would be I keep my Porcellio expansus white with my Paranophyta formosana colony, and it's been really a match made in heaven. The two of them have very similar, just similar enough needs that it's easy to accommodate both of them, and but different enough that the isopods tend to hang out in the more humid spots, and the Paranophyta up in the bark generally, but in more of the drier spots, but with just enough overlap that the enclosure really accommodates both of them. And both those colonies have done very well until I stopped taking regular care in the form of putting food in over the summertime, and then didn't replace the substrate and whatnot. So, and I actually have some Cubaris Pak Chong that slipped into there from a small bin that I was keeping above that. And I've just been culling them to the point where I'm just crossing my fingers for some weird inbreeding mutation to pop up. Not the inbreeding itself will not result in mutations. That's not how that works. It's a stable mutation rate for a lot of things. But because you're crossing sibling to sibling or parent to child or whatever, any simple recessive mutations that would have otherwise persisted in the colony for a very long time, or maybe the individuals that were hets you would pick out and sell off accidentally because you didn't know what you're looking at, etc. But because of the inbreeding, you have those double homozygous recessives can pop up more frequently. at least you'll be able to find them easier. They're more likely to pop up in the less heterozygous, less heterozygous population. So, anyways, where I was going with that is, so I have the pack chongs also going there, and I wanted to eradicate them, and then I thought I would do this thing and hopefully sort of grind for some sort of mutation, because an orange mutation, those would be really cool. And actually, I don't know if Derek Niehaus watches the stream. He's actually been a really good isopod friend of mine the last couple of months, but he will be sending me some of the black pack chongs, which I'm very excited for. They look like a darker Cubaris Marina, and somebody pulling up next door, and I like that. I love the look of Cubaris Marina and whatnot. So I don't have any Paranophyta formosana on hand to show. And again, I mentioned that the colony had actually crashed because of me not feeding them enough over the summertime. So they're still rebounding. I have healthy adults, but there's only 12 to 15 of them in there. So I'm kind of hard to find them in the 10-gallon enclosure. And Paranophyta do something quite annoying too. When you uncover them, they all skitter off and they burrow down, and they're usually not really burrowy roaches. They'll hide under the bark and whatnot. You'll see them out and about. But when you scare them, though, they will sort of burrow down, but not straight down like Pycnoscelis, kind of off to the side, and they'll just sort of make themselves scarce, especially the nymphs, which is another thing where I'm like, wow, there could be a bunch of nymphs in here already, and I wouldn't know it, because the second that I would unveil anything, if they were under a piece of sphagnum and I didn't see them, they would just go straight down. So, by the way, so I do keep those together. And do I keep any roaches without substrate? No, I have been keeping on substrate for a decade now, and I could never, ever go back. It's just, I don't know why you'd want to keep them without it. They do worse. Babies aren't as comfortable. As with anything else without substrate, they smell more. I mean, my first experience with this was lobster roaches used to have a reputation for being a very smelly roach in terms of the colonies themselves. And this is back when it was common practice to keep everything without substrate, and then it was recommended for a couple of species to use substrate, like Panchlora and Leuchihormetica, etc. So it was definitely during times when the recommendations were all geared toward, you assume the roach could be kept without substrate, and it was a special exception if it needed to be kept on it. So, but this was when I was keeping the lobster roaches, Nalphitis cinerea, without substrate, and I used to think, the colony's smelly. Oh, it has like a weird smell to it. Oh, I can see what people are thinking about. And then I don't know exactly what caused me. I either sold off a bunch or I got rid of a bunch. I don't really remember exactly what happened. But I was down to one of my little hexagon containers of lobster roaches. I think maybe at the time they weren't selling very well, so I sold off a whole bunch of them and just kept the colony to have the species or something. But I put them into the hexagon container with some cypress mulch substrate to get them going. Or maybe I isolated a group and I wanted to like mass produce another set or something. And I remember after a couple of weeks opening up the container and smelling it and thinking like, this smells nice. This smells kind of like honey. And the increase in the moisture and having the small silver springtails in there without the just pile of roach frass building on the bottom and then the corpses piling up, etc., actually made it quite pleasant to have those and to work with them. And that sort of was the beginning of thinking like maybe we should keep like all roaches on substrate, because that was one of the species that I think I kept those without substrate the longest. That was one of the last holdouts. But it makes sense. The roaches that theoretically should do well without substrate would be the ones in the wild that are usually found up on bark or in logs. And I don't mean like Cryptocarchus, where they're logs that are touching the ground, but sort of like like a dead standing tree sort of situation. So things like Uricotis, which you'd find Uricotis floridana at least, Groundfordurina, but then you have problems with mold if you don't have a substrate with them. What's another one? Paraplaneta, although the ooths do appreciate being moist for hatching. And this is actually touching on that. The substrate helping with ooze hatching is something that I kind of have should help because of maintaining the humidity. But there's some old publications showing that Blatta orientalis, which is a species that's pretty tied to moist places more so than like Shelfodella lateralis, at least as a not pet, as a pest species, more tied to moist places. Supposedly, they were able to hatch ooths with 100% survival rate at 0% relative humidity. And I would love to look at that paper again and see what that was, but the ooths are very, in general, dry tolerant, but that's just something about that I think needs a bit more explaining if that actually was the results. I mean, maybe it was a perfect ooth. Maybe they were. I know there's different ways to measure atmospheric uh, water, but I'm pretty sure it was 0% relative humidity, which would be very dry, and maybe they collected it late in development. If it was freshly laid, I don't know about that, but that would sort of be sort of testament against the having to keep them on some, and you can keep some ooths too moist, they will rot. um is there anywhere on earth that is actually 0% humidity? I wouldn't be surprised if some arid places reach very close to 0% humidity, like somewhere in Arizona on the surface, when there's been no rain for a long time, or on a rock surface or something like that. So, but I don't think it's a very common natural phenomenon. So, but a lot of things also with ooze I was mentioning before, they can rot if it's too humid. At least some species like Caridiids or some families can have that problem. Some species in Coridiidae will have that problem. It's more obviously more common that things would hit 100% relative humidity because it's rain, um, and that things would adjust to a dry, wet cycle. So I do use bark instead of egg cartons for the lobsters, although they were getting a little bit numerous in one of the bins. So I did actually. Maybe he would like to come in now. I will be right back. And again, false alarm. But yes, I do use bark, and I have been using some of those uh, egg carton material drink coasters in some of the bins that have gotten a little bit numerous. So I have been using those in situations where I'm not really short on bark right now, but I don't have enough, I feel. But predominantly, it is bark or wood slabs or particle board or a myriad of other things that I am using in with the lobster roaches right now. And again, with the substrate on the bottom, it's a little bit of coconut fiber, but I think I may be using mostly cypress mulch. It gives the nymphs more places to hide. It's going crazy again. I will be right back, everybody. he will do this thing where sometimes he doesn't want to come in the back door, but he will go up to it and make a big fuss about it. This is probably the first person I met so could replace his dog with a girlfriend and end up with a less needy partner. he's he he's great, but it's been a tough month with him being on the lead outside instead of being able to roam around the whole yard, and that's of course because he has been picking up girl dog scents and trying to run off and make puppies and can't have the running off part. So it's been a tough month because I can't put the new fencing up with the ground frozen. But the second we get a thaw down to about 3 feet, oh yeah, fencing's going up, and then of course he can go roam around the yard and do as he pleases. But it's even with 2 walks a day with the Gompers, they really want more. Not necessarily mental stimulation. They're dogs that need to have some sort of job or purpose, which would be sitting with the livestock. And he doesn't really have that right now because he can't go out and hang out in the part of the yard that has everything because he'll run off, and I couldn't find a long enough lead for him. So it's been a tough month for both of us, but thankfully, with March, things tend to thaw out. Usually by the end of March, I can work the ground. Most of the snow is gone now. It's just the ground's frozen. So, and then after that, things will be a lot better because he'll have more stuff to do outside. I know there's a billion piles of compost and bunny litter that I've dumped that I know that he's just dying to go dig around in, but he can't right now. So, anyways, teach him to herd roaches, problem solved. Yeah, I have actually tried to feed him some roaches before to see what his reaction was, and he mostly sort of paws at them and sort of yips at them, and he'll like pick them up and flip them. Obviously, I pre-killed them first, but he has also learned to not mess around with stick bugs and darkling beetles because there was a couple Elioti spinipes got out soon after I had collected them, and he obviously got skunked by them when he went to molest them, and so he learned his lesson very quickly not to mess with darkling beetles and also with stick bugs because the Anisomorpha sprayed him too. So really good, really shows you how good those defense mechanisms are, and then also the fact that he's sort of maintained that knowledge for a long time that he shouldn't mess with things that look or smell that way. So he's definitely not a dumb dog, but he's very free thinking. He'd be very stubborn at times too. He commands he'll do. Indoors he'll listen to pretty much anybody. You can tell him to sit and come here and all that other stuff, and he'll follow it to a T. Outside where there's more distractions, and some of it might be because he's still a puppy, he just in one ear and out the other, just doesn't even seem to notice. But he is very intuitive on the leash. He's learned a couple of commands and learned what different pressures on the leash mean. So he has this very good intuitiveness there. It also made me think that Gompers might actually make good like sleigh dogs or like pulling dogs, even though they don't really have the sort of broadness of the chest. They have they're very powerful necks, and so just made me think that might be something to do to help them blow off some steam in the future. Is hook him up to like a cart and have him take me somewhere because he definitely could pull a cart. So. Anyways, but we were talking about substrate and bark pieces and all that stuff. Hello, Shane. Good to see you. Just finishing up the discussion on bark pieces and substrate and just a general thing. What I'd like to do, and I need to probably talk to Will about this because he's the cinematographer here, unless I can figure out something, or if I can find some sort of rig that will hold my camera. I would really like to do one of those cheeky, in your face obnoxious YouTube tutorial videos on a basic Roach and or isopod enclosure. You know, the one where I do a more professional voice and I sit there and be like, here's how we're going to look into making your new Roach enclosure. Here's what you're going to need, and blah, 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 and go on from there. I really like to do that. I put some more revisitable content on the channel and some good stuff that I think a lot of people could use. But then I also debate, well, I could do that, but I also really need to redo the Roach husbandry guide because there's a lot of outdated advice on there. Still, the bare bones are still good, but there's a lot there's a lot of outdated things on that care guide that I need to go back and revisit. Awesome guidance on bug care, says Chris Snyder. Thank you. Any suggestion for what I might be doing to kill superworms after they emerge from puberty? Don't seem to live long after they darken up. Is it possible they're too dry? Could be too dry or could be too moist too. Some stuff will just sit and rot. If something's too moist after closing from a pupa, I find, or after just maturing or going through molt in general, I find if they're too moist or there was some other problem similar, you'll usually find them kind of slumped up in a corner. You know, they won't be flipped over on their backs. They'll be kind of like, they'll look like they kind of stretch their legs out really far and push their front end forward up into a corner or up against the side of something. Or they'll just they'll be in a very natural position, you know, looking like they're pretty much alive, and you go to pick them up and they're limp. So that's my advice, is seeing if they're actually too moist, depending on how you found them. Usually when bugs die due to desiccation, they'll be on their back, or they'll be in a similar posture to what I said before, but instead of having the limbs sort of looking loose and floppy and skewing about, their legs will be more tucked up underneath them, and the back end of the roach will be, or beetle, I guess, will be sort of tilted upwards. So, but you know, I would look and see what the humidity, if it's a humidity. On their back, and I actually read an article on this a while ago. It's a very energetically stable position for their body to end up in, basically. So, because a lot of, at least with roaches, and I think with other insects, center of mass is higher up on their body. You know, like right around behind where the pronotum is. And so when they die and they lose control of their legs, they can't grip onto things. They will usually naturally turn over onto their back, because it's a more not energetically as far as, like, you know, maintaining the insect or invertebrates. You know, it's not saving them energy. It's just there's a natural amount of latent energy that goes into them staying upright with their body design, and when they die, yeah, they're back heavy. Thank you for finding a good way. They're back heavy, basically, and so when they desiccate and they die, they usually end up on their back because they're back heavy, and that's why they have their legs up like that. And it's the same not just for drying out, but for being exposed to herbicides or pesticides of various sorts too. Because they lose control and they just end up flipped on their backs like that. So, yeah, Chris, I would look into seeing if they're too dry or too humid. You can't go wrong with offering them a small piece of apple or banana after they've eclosed, basically. And I think that would help if they end up being too dry. Offering that will be helpful. Because unlike watering them, you know, which will be good, I guess that's another thing you do. Offer them some water with a gentle spray and see if they want to drink any of it. They are more sensitive to things right after they close, and then after they sclerotize, after they harden up, they get a bit more resilient. Currently, the hobby superworm beetle Latin name is Phobos atratus or atratus, however you want to say it. It used to be Morio, whatever taxonomic stuff happened. It used to be Zophobos morio, and now it's Zophobos atratus. So, and let me think if there's anything else that I needed to touch on. Alan, this thought just popped into my head, but there was somebody you put in touch with me about some Aranavega a couple weeks ago, and I haven't heard from them, but I also feel like we had talked about him shipping now or soon-ish. So if you are still in contact with him, let him know I'm still interested, unless he's just, was waiting for the aforementioned time period to pass, because weather is still kind of crappy for shipping. I know I've been shipping all winter, but it's just kind of weird. And I feel like I said this before on the stream too, but this is probably the worst year for potholes that I can remember. The roads here in Michigan are just completely screwed up right now. The turn lane a mile from my house that I take to go pretty much everywhere when I need supplies just has like 1.5 by 8-foot sections of the road just gouged out with all the rebar and stuff exposed from just these awful thaw melt cycles we've been having for the last 6 weeks, basically. And it's just horrible. And I almost got, I won't exaggerate and say that I almost got hit, but I got very uncomfortable sitting in the turn lane today as multiple people who were turning right. Yeah, so I was here and they were turning this way, who were turning right, or maybe they were turning left. They were turning, and there was a big pothole in that part of the road, and they had to avoid it, they had to either go further away or closer. It felt like all of them were going closer to me to avoid their tires falling into the pothole. And yeah, it's a mess. So, and I wonder if or when it'll be fixed. There's also a bridge on the main road that goes by my house that they've been working on for the last 3 months, and doesn't seem like they've made much progress on it. So that's been fun too, having traffic there be down to 1 lane both ways, in a two-ish plus lane road. Boy, needy boy. So they also really like canned pumpkin during the fall as far as mealworms and superworms go. I actually don't have a colony of Zophobos atratus at the moment. I used to have a strain of large ones that I had selected going, and then I think I picked a generation of all females. I always used to pick a couple that were a little on the smaller side, just in case it was sex linked or there was a sex relation. If I picked all the hugest ones, they were all females. Well, I think one of the generations I ended up picking all females, and I actually lost the line of them. I've always had problems with keeping Zophobos. I think I either want to keep them too formally in an enclosure with all the bark and leaf litter and stuff like that, or too informally, because I've tried straight up oats and all that other stuff. This is a long time ago, maybe 2009, and just killed them. They can't take the dryness of just that stuff. Alan, I still have the Zophobos from Florida. I haven't actually found any larvae in them yet, although there's plenty of food and space and whatnot. But I don't know. I still don't know if those are straight up hobby line atratus or not. Even though that guy looked at them and said that they were probably atratus, it just looks so different. It could be just a variation that came from somewhere else. The hobby atratus probably came from, or for sure came from Brazil. For sure came from Brazil. The person who used to own Agama International, back in the, I don't know when Agama International was operating at full capacity, was actually the person who brought in the superworms. And I can't remember if I heard directly from them or from somebody else. Uh, Maybe it was somebody who knew them. But they came from Brazil. So the hobbies, the Phobos atratus that we all use to feed herps and other stuff are all Brazilian stock. And that person also was the one who brought the Eublabrus distanti, or whatever they're going to end up being for sure. They match the holotype, I think, of distanti. So that's the label I've been using for them now. But he brought the ivory head roaches in, and more than likely they came from the same import, and thus our ivory head roaches are most likely from Brazil. So along with the Zophobus atratus, because he used both of those to feed his colonies of agamas, and he had a bunch of them. Joshua Campos, do you get any Archimandrita tessellata with very dark wings in your colony? I tried to selectively breed for them some years ago. Tried to sell them, but I ended up introducing them back into my normal colony. A lot of roaches can be encouraged, or when they're molting to their final molt, you can get darker coloration if they're kept cooler and more humid. Something with the way that the pigments accumulate in the roaches. It could be humidity, or it could be the temperature. I have to tease that apart. And I know this because if you raise Blaberus, the Atropos from Florida, in very warm conditions, you will get almost entirely, they will look very much so like Discoidalis. If you keep them cooler, unlike Discoidalis, you'll get larger pronotum mark. Cooler or more humid. I'm trying to tease it apart. So I would think that your dark-winged tessellata were probably darker winged because when they were molting to adulthood, they were kept in either cooler or more humid conditions than usual, which is why you would get a cohort of them all with the dark wings. And the only other really records of dark-winged individuals are on the Blaberus.com pages, where there's one. I think the main picture that he used for tessellata had a lighter individual next to a darker individual, although I don't think I've ever quite seen them get as light as the ones in the pictures on there. That actually reminds me, I forget that I have Archimandrita tessellata so frequently, because for many years they weren't doing well, and I finally decided to put them into a very formal setup because I really like them. They're definitely in my top 5 roaches, maybe I'd go so far to say. I have to watch and make sure I don't contradict myself in any of these videos in terms of my favorite roaches, but the current order for sure is the ivory heads at the top at number 1. Second place is the Hemithoxostra vittata, and then somewhere in the top 10 also are probably some Caridiids and miscellaneous Blaberids and Bladids and whatnot. But yeah, I forget that I have my colony of Archimandrita because they live in a viv in my living room, because I like them so much. I want to put the efforts into them. They have thrown a lot of dark wings at multiple temps humidity levels. You give it a go, and also maybe give a go keeping some humid and some drier and some cooler and some warmer, because in my colony, whenever I would get dark individuals, it was usually because of again, like I said, coolness or overwatering. It's hard to tease the two of those apart, at least in my older setups, because usually if it was cooler, there'd be less evaporation. It was either the summer, or I was watering a lot in the container, or it was winter when the room was warm, but the tessellata would always be closer to the floor and in the corner where it was colder. So, but currently the colony, which has a heat bulb on part of it, the adults don't seem to be directly under it, but a lot of the nymphs tend to gather there under the substrate. So, but the only way you'll know is to try and breed for it a couple generations and see what happens. So, but yeah, I would be skeptical about it. Although my colony comes from 15 mixed that acro Sean something, really old roach keeper. Every once in a while he'll shoot me an email to see what's up. And every once in a while, I mean every couple of years, he'll send me an email to see what's up and how I'm doing. But that would have been 2000, shortly after, or maybe even shortly before I got my Giganteus. it's very hard for me to remember when I got my first Tessellata, but I want to say it was immediately before, immediately after I got my Giganteus colony, and I got them from that Sean guy. I think I traded him. He sent me like 15, 16. They were maybe 3, 4 molts from adulthood. I still remember getting that box and looking at the Tessellata and the container he sent while I was downstairs at my parents' on the computer. I still have that memory very clearly. And then I also very clearly remember my first babies or my first adults. I think my first adults matured around Halloween of that year. And then in high school, there was this percussionist um, Haitian band called Youssou N'Dour. Let me see where he's from again. Senegalese singer, songwriter, musician, composer, Youssou N'Dour. And I remember going to this Youssou N'Dour concert when I was in high school, and then getting home, and I had to, I didn't have a timer. My mom was always weird about electricity, and if she knew how much stuff I have plugged in now, which she does know in part, but if she knew exactly how much stuff I have plugged in now, she would go absolutely insane. But anyways, so I couldn't have a timer on my heat lamp, and I couldn't barely even have the heat lamp to heat my roaches with. But I had to, turn it off and turn it on every morning manually because I couldn't use a timer with it. And so I remember when I got back from the Youssou N'Dour concert, or maybe shortly before I went to the concert, I would go and do the spray of all my colonies once or twice a day. And I remember spraying and seeing seeing a bunch of little baby Tessellata crawl up to drink the spray, and I was like, "Oh, I did it! I bred another roach!" And it was very exciting to see that. So, boy, that means the gestation after maturing would have been roughly 2 months on Tessellata in what was ideal conditions, I would think back then. So, but anyways, where I was going with this is my colony is very inbred, and I don't think that my colony's problems are in any way related to being inbred. I think it was husbandry and the Serratia infection that got into the colony somehow over time. So, and of course now treating them very well with daily care and actual large enclosure, etc. Hoping to get them back to their former glory, and I think it's working quite well. I have to check for babies. There should be some newborns by now that have popped up. Josh says, I did try breeding for it. The point I was trying to make was that I set up a selected breeds, have got many, many babies from them, and then introduced them back to the normal colony, causing the vast majority of my normal colony to now sport dark wings. Well, in the future, if you want to send some my way and see if they'll turn out the same under my husbandry conditions, I would be interested in that, perhaps. I would keep them separate, obviously. Or you can do the legwork yourself of trying to breed for some other stuff. I think that Roach cultivars have some pretty heavy potential, especially with hissers. And I have been working on a couple of hisser strains myself in the shadows. A couple of people may have heard of the Lilliputian project to make dwarf hisser-sized Portentosa. And with the F2, because the other one's the F. No, this is the F1 from the formal project. So the first generation that's going to get heavy selection breeding. The females don't seem quite as affected, but I have had a lot of small males pop up, so I have to go through and pick the smallest, and then go pick the smallest female, and then cross them, and keep going down in size, and hope that it stabilizes. But it seems to be very strongly heritable in the males, maybe not so much in the female. So I'm just going to keep working with it. A couple other color projects. Oh, I was so mad. I was so mad at myself because I have this really cool. They're all out of the mahoganies because a lot of these were culls from the last couple generations of mahogany hissers. I was so mad at myself. I had this perfect pair of this new hisser project. I haven't really come up with a name for it, but they are, it's a very light orange and very dark pronotum. So you get sort of the Chapardi look in terms of the colors, but the full-on Portentosa size. And I was so mad because I had picked this perfect pair of adults, and both of them relatively fresh adults. And I thought that I had cleared out the whole enclosure of all the other individuals so that I could just have this pair being there, because I separate the females and the male nymphs. Or I will usually pull all the immature females and leave all the males in the enclosure, and then pick the best pair, put it back in the enclosure, and then let them breed. But I was very, very upset because I missed a male. I missed a male in the enclosure, and he was obviously he had been mature for longer than the male that I had picked to pair with her, and so it's possible that this flawless pair, looking exactly like I want this strain to look like, that this other male could have mated with the female before the male that I picked, and I was very upset about that. I pulled that other male as soon as I found him, and just kicking myself for not double checking the enclosure before I did that. So I'm hoping that, I think male roaches can mate pretty soon after they mature. I don't know about hissers. There may be some internal maturity that has to occur there before they can mate as far as the males. But I just, if I leave them together, maybe he'll just keep inseminating this female and she'll get rid of the other male sperm, or maybe, after a couple times of him being the one mating with her constantly, it'll be mostly his sperm and her spermatheca or whatever it is. Um, I'm hopeful, and of course, the female is actually the more important one in this pairing because I got maybe 60 total babies out of that pair before I decided that I had enough babies to do some selection. And out of the 30 or so females, only this one female met my criteria for this line. So, the females, definitely the more important one. A lot of the females that were produced had the more rich orange coloration that you see on the mahoganies, versus this female is a very pale orange, very pumpkiny looking orange on her. And with the thing again that I really like is a dark pronotum. So aiming for that contrast between the dark black pronotum and the more pumpkin orange or very light pumpkin orange body. And so, the lose one generation, 50% het. With these, there's probably a variety of genes and modifiers going on here. It's not a simple recessive trait that can just be evenly proven out. I'm going for very holistic phenotypes, so it's not like I would be having hets to work with or something here. There's more complex genotype to this that's going to take more generations of selection. So so I'm just hoping that I'll just start that pair will just start producing, and I can start. I'll get a bunch of subadults that I can pull, and then grab the phenotype that I want, because I think this would be a very popular line in time. And I would like to, there used to be, once upon a time, there was a line of Portentosa. I mean, they may have been pure at the time, but that was called like Big or Giant or something like that. That had supposedly had quite large males, and I never got my hands on that strain because I figured I would breed for it myself, or it would always be around, and then it just kind of fell out of fashion. You don't hear anybody labeling their Portentosa as being giant or big, or the line is clearly lost, has been diffused into hybrid colonies or remaining pure colonies of hobby stock that people just have never gotten rid of, blah blah blah, or tracked. So I would like to breed for some big male Portentosa. I would like to sort of revive that spirit, because, and if Kai is watching this, or if Kai ever watches this, with the beetle people, they're always talking about they want big males with big horns or big jaws or whatever. And hissing roaches are big roaches. They're big insects, actually. A lot of the fighting beetles and whatnot, they just sort of hold themselves up better. They're more elevated with their legs. Their posturing is better. But their body size is pretty small. You can get... I've seen plenty of Groundfedorina and Princessia that have just these huge males that put a lot of other insects to shame. And it's really a tragedy that for being such an easy to rear creature, you can keep all life stages together. You don't have to worry about specialized diet, all the stuff like you need with beetles, at least in the form of flake soil or leaf litter or whatever. It's really a shame that they're not more popular among sort of that sort of showy, not in the sense that, oh, it's brightly colored, oh, it looks like this, but like, oh yeah, that's a big bug, sort of mindset. It's very unfortunate that they aren't, because those big male hissers, they're huge. They're very imposing insects, even more so than a lot of the beetles that people raise for the imposingness or for fighting and stuff like that. And so I feel like I like to tap into that sort of energy there and pull a big male Portentosa and start breeding for size and see what we can do and what the genetics are behind it, because it seems like, at least in the males with the Portentosa, that you can breed down in size pretty easily within a generation or two. Again, with the Lilliputians, with a lot of the F1 males looking very small, very tiny. So breeding up shouldn't be a problem. The only thing I have noticed with producing larger hissers, there was a time where I had somebody, this is maybe around 2011, 2012, where I had somebody who was paying me to raise some Oblongonota to gigantic sizes for them. They wanted them for dead stock or something like that. And I was feeding them mostly cat food. And I lost a couple due to gout, which is a problem with roaches because of their endosymbionts. A lot of roaches don't have a way to excrete additional nitrogen, which is why it's bad to feed them mixed diets, pre-mixed diets that they can't pick stuff out of, is because you can kill roaches pretty easily with gout. Because of their endosymbionts, at least blabberids, ectobiids, and I think some blattids have means of getting rid of extra nitrogen in the form of basically pooping out little nitrogen pellets. It's most observable in Parkoblatta and Paratemnopteryx. I've actually noticed this and have seen them poop out these little extra nitrogenous pellets that are pure white. But anyways, so I killed a couple of them due to gout with the cat food. This is 50% protein or whatever. But I did have some emerge, and there was one that was just huge. The thing was like almost 5 inches long. I would say definitively, without exaggerating, if you put that thing down and just sort of like helped it relax a little bit so it wasn't like all hunched up, and just sort of let the abdomen expand to its natural shape. It was definitely 4.5 inches long. And I think there's a picture of this on Roach Forum of this gigantic male somewhere. I had it next to a Macropenesthia to show off the size and just show how big it was. And it was longer than the Macropenesthia, which it's not an easy, or not a hard bar to hit, because Macropenesthia are the heaviest roach, not necessarily the longest roach, which belongs to, I think, what Megaloblatta species. But anyways, this Oblongonota male was gigantic. But I did notice, I think it molted to mature. It hit maturity with a antenna problem, with one of the antennae was just naturally sort of wiggly or deformed or something like that. So I feel like that would be a problem as the size went up. Is not this garbage about like there's not enough oxygen in the atmosphere. Yeah, if there's a selective pressure and enough variation, anything can evolve anything, which is why we have coconut crabs as the largest terrestrial invertebrate with their modified gills acting as lungs. There's not enough oxygen for them in the atmosphere. No, they just found a solution to that problem because there was enough variation, there was a niche open, and there was enough morphological means that they could adapt something. That's why we have lungs and we can breathe on land. It's like saying, oh, the fish would never evolve out of the water because they can't breathe the atmospheric oxygen. No, find a way. Something happens. There's an innovation on a physiological level. So anyways, I don't think oxygen would be a problem. The problem would more so be there'd be there'd have to be some very holistic selection to make sure other things which are not necessarily part of the animal's physiology do not go out of whack. For example, the thing that just immediately comes to my mind is maybe if you selectively breed for a larger cockroach, some of the connective tissue will have some problems until you select that out and make sure that the animals aren't falling apart after a couple of weeks of adulthood. There could be a higher chance for prolapses or something like that, or higher chance for um, the exoskeleton not to harden properly when they mature. There's a bunch of little stopgap things I feel could happen once you started getting up in size with the roaches, but nothing that good, attentive, selective breeding couldn't take into account. I've been trying to feed off the small males of my red runners. Of course, there's no way to tell whether or not they've made it or if it's even genetic. That's not real. Are you talking about the coconut crabs? Some eggs as being gigantic. Uh, I do. I keep the genetic variety in colonies that are not being line bred because one, I want my colonies to reflect the natural variation of the species that I am offering as much as possible. So even though something like my big torch key, Eurycotus floridana, which people the thing they're known for is the pronotum border markings. Um, Even though I could very easily just say, okay, I'm going to call all the ones that don't have the best markings, and okay, I'm going to call all the ones that don't have the markings in this colony. It's not reflective of the natural variation of that locality based on the stock that I received. So I received the 1.2 adults or 2.1 or whatever adults that I had originally received of those. And of them, one of them did not have very strong pronotum markings. So it would be disingenuous to propagate that stock and sell it as big torch key while selecting out the individuals I felt did not conform to a human-based standard. That being said, yes, I will work on creating a captive line, and currently am working on creating a captive line of Eurycotus floridana from Big Torch Key that have very well-defined pronotum markings and that will consistently breed true and that will be offered as a separate line derived from pure Big Torch Key stock. So, but anyways, with the other stuff again, I try not to call males that are too small or males that are too big or whatever out of my hisser colonies and whatnot because I'm trying to maintain the inherent genetic diversity. Because also, somebody down the line might want to do something stupid like I'm doing and breed for smaller roaches or bigger roaches or X roaches or Y roaches, and that variation will be of use to them. So if I cull it out already and don't maintain the parent stock or don't maintain a reservoir of the original diversity, then it's gone, and somebody else has to collect them from the wild or what have you to get it again. So this ended up being a very long stream, and I thought, as I always do, that I would not have anything to talk about. And apparently, I did. Last two things I will say is bemoaning the incessant USPS delays, and apparently there were more storms recently. So the boxes that I sent out this week are getting delays. And fingers crossed. The weather's been relatively mild, other than the storms apparently. So I think everything should reach its destination okay. But we'll see. The final say is whether or not I get an email about DOAs. But also, fortunately, by the next ship date, which is mid-March, I shouldn't have to worry about all this stuff as much. We should be past a lot of this cold weather and all this other stuff. Speaking of big bugs, somebody in the U.S. hobby's got to start breeding those Theropoda glunifera. Oh, those. Will and I have been quoting. If anybody else here wants somebody who has more accolades and clout than I do about miscellaneous biological stuff, if any of you have or haven't already heard of Crime Pays But Botany Doesn't, I think guy's actual name is Joey Santor, and his pen name is Tony Santoro or something like that. Those names might be mixed up. Um, but anyways, so he does his thing is plants, and he rambles on about how much he despises modern liberalism and modern capitalism and many modern isms, and then also brings up the plants, and very informative about the um, biology and taxonomy of all these really cool obscure plants all over the place and stuff like that. And of course, he has partially his stick, some vulgar terms, some just very entertaining things that he brings up. Very amusing mixture of science and entertainment, if you ask me. But anyways, Will and I have been quoting one of his videos. He goes to the Dominican Republic, and he comes across what I think is a Scolopendra alternans. The little bit in the video he does when he uncovers it and it's crawling across the ground, he goes like, "Massive sketchy bastard," as the Scolopendra is scurrying off. So when I saw that was a house centipede that you brought up there, Josh, all I could think of was his little bit on "massive sketchy bastard." So yeah, those would be cool. I keep breaking my own heart over culturing the U.S. native house centipedes, because they just desiccate by the time I get back from any of these trips. I collected like 2 or 3 of them on this last one when we were at the stop in Texas, and I didn't have too high hopes because I wanted to get a group of 5 of them, and Will was already dying, and I was dying, and all of our headlights were out and whatever. I just forced Will to go watch two copulating sulfugids for like 45 minutes. But yes, they are actually native to the U.S. This one species it's like a brownish gold color of a Scutigera. But anyways, within like a day of traveling to get back to Michigan, they died because it was too dry in the containers that I gave them, even though I had missed it and whatnot. And this is this is an arid land species that has problems with desiccation. Granted, they're usually underneath, slates of rock. It makes a very nice humid microclimate and not in a container, but still they desiccate. And it's like, oh, I'm getting so put off. But next time I find them, they're getting the full suite, getting a nice humid container, getting a bunch of fruit flies to eat on the way back, and then I'm dumping them in a 5.5 gallon or something with plenty of space, plenty of microclimates and all that stuff. I got some babies from a wild-caught female at Scutigera coleoptrata, but they probably desiccated, almost certainly desiccated. They're so dryness intolerant. I mean, at my parents' house, they come out of the drains in the spring and the summer, sometimes in the wintertime. But it would always be in the basement. They just do not last long if it's dry at all. They are so confined to those sort of spaces. You can't keep them like pseudoscorpions. I think they would prefer more ventilation. I did have one that produced babies that I kept on display at U of M Dearborn in a container. Actually, it was quite I might get an enclosure going for one of those again. I just used sort of a moist clay on the bottom, but the problem there was that it couldn't be too moist because then the top of the enclosure would get condensation. You couldn't see into it. And if it was too dry, obviously this thing would desiccate. But then I also had to keep it a not so ventilated container because of the care schedule that things were on there. So yeah, you can't keep them like pseudoscorpions. They're really cool, and I find them outside pretty frequently during the summer here around my back and front porch lights. I may try getting a culture going. I saw a big one last September or August. I saw a huge one. And, I know some people, some of which are very good friends of mine, who I would trust not to exaggerate or not to have skewed perceptions of insects and other invertebrates, who are just like, I saw one, it was this big. No, you didn't. Not in the United States. The biggest one I have ever seen, which was probably the one that I saw back in September, was maybe that long. Compare that to my face. Maybe that. maybe that long. Maybe that long. And they're so leggy. But what I think skews people's perceptions of particularly scutigoromorphs is that usually when you see them, you're in a building or a place that has indoor lighting or lighting coming from an angle. And so when you look at this thing that's got a very unnatural, irregular shape and outline on a wall or something like that, the shadow that the bodies and the leg throws when the light hits, yeah, it makes it look a lot bigger than it could make it look twice the size that it actually did. But I believe the species that Josh was talking about, I have a verified arachnologist, entomologist friend, Chuck Ford, who saw them in Taiwan, and they were legitimately, I think, 5 or 6 inches long. And they're very leggy, but still, it's a big house centipede. There's no doubting that it's a very impressive animal. So yeah, maybe one day they'll pop up. But considering how delicate the smaller ones are, I can only imagine you need somebody very dedicated to get one of the larger ones back in good condition too. Fortunately, they don't seem to mind losing legs as long as they can molt again. So we are past the 2-hour mark. I wanted to bring up the last thing, or the second thing I was going to bring up before wrapping up the stream. I may have spent a little bit too much money on bugs on Sunday, and due to some other unfortunate things which I would prefer not to talk about on the stream, I could some extra funds would be quite nice right now. So anybody who's watching the stream, if you have been on the fence about getting an order and desire to submit an order for some things within the next 3 hours, go ahead and shoot me an email and bring up that you were in the stream, etc., and you will receive 20% off of your order. Of course, the minimum order is $30, etc., but just bring up that you were watching the stream, so 20% off of your entire order of whatever you decide to get. So with that being said, thanks again for joining me, everyone. I will see everybody next week. Yeah, I think next week. I should still be on 2 weeks of streams. So I will see everybody next week. Still have some things I need to add to the new species page, but that may not happen. I did the big push and got a lot of stuff out there. There's still a lot of stuff that needs to be added, but will probably take a break and go back and add pictures to some things as needed, because that's more important than adding just a bunch more new species of stuff. So have a good night, everybody, and may your cultures be ever be bountiful, be ever bountiful. I need to get a reminder for that going, like I do for my weird wording for the name of the stream. So anyways, take care and good night.